With all the civil unrest that has been happening around the world, the United States has been the main focus of civil rights movement called the Black Lives Matter and created a popular slogan called defund the police. Now, in an article from CNN on June 17, 2020, Scotty Andrews states that there's a group of dissenters who believe Americans can survive without law enforcement as we know it. And Americans, those dissenters believe may be better off without it. And the solution to police brutality and racial inequalities in policing is quite simple. Just defund the police. State and federal governments should, in fact, refund the police even more instead of defunding. Now, I'm currently studying criminal justice at Cal State LA for 3 years, and I would provide information of what I accumulated or and learned throughout the years, and I will also provide my personal opinion on the whole issue of defunding the police. Today, I will talk about the problems that that is occurring with Black Lives Matter slogan, defund the police, and the inherency of police department faces, and how police and communities can help resolve civil unrest in the future. Now that I introduced my topic, next I'll further talk about the problem at hand. So, defund the police slogan has become a very popular uh symbol for the Black Lives Matter after the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, affecting mostly ethnic minority communities. Trust in the community, which also gives them lack of credibility and corruption in the criminal justice system that they thought will probably provide the justice and ethical and moral standards to our community. So with defund the police, there's has been a lot of violence because people believe that their voices haven't been heard enough. So it basically just justifies their extreme actions, and their extreme actions can also just be vandalism, throwing stuff at federal employees, city workers, etc. So, in an article from The Atlantic published on June 2nd of 2020, Olga Kazan states that in this way, some of the looting is lashing out against capitalism, the police, and other forces that are seen perpetuating as racism. Although looters and protesters are two separate groups, yes, indeed, but it's also ironic that the actual protesting groups fight for justice, but not like you wouldn't really see a single person or a group of people trying to segregate the looters and pointing them out like, hey, yo, they're vandalizing public buildings and that are not in conflict with the movement. So the people that suffered the most was local business. So and it just happens to be at the wrong time at the wrong place. Proactive policing as the system and aggressive enforcement of low-level violation and heightened police presence in an area where crime is anticipated. There are extreme protesters who will do anything in their power to further escalate police response. Hence, why some protesters will be more injured than others. As a good Samaritan, people from the communities needs to report these extreme actions that will do more harm than make these communities be better from what it was already in a deep hole of issues that it was facing. Now, from the CNN article that I found from the same person, Scotty Andrews states that defunding is simpler than disbanding, though, and at least one mayor's already taken that step after Californians decried a proposal to increase Los Angeles Police Department budget to $1.6 billion. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti agrees to slash 100 million to almost 150 million from the proposed funding. Now that I have talked about the problem, next I will talk about the attitudinal inherency of it. Police department loses credibility and trust among communities if a few bad apples are exposed to the media. Now, few bad apples, that term is basically meaning police officers who operate under unethical point of view and is basically corrupt, unlawful, has no remorse. So this issue leads to people taking action into their own hands because they feel that the justice system is already corrupt. It won't help them and it won't like protect them from anyone else. So they take matters into their own hands. So from an article written by adjunct professor Dr. Arturo Perez, published on August 4th, 2017, he states ethics is the moral principle that governs a person's behavior or conducting of an activity. Now, morals are concerned with the principle and rights and wrong behavior and the goodness or bad human character. And law is basically the system of rules that a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the action of human character. Law is the system of rules is the action of its members and may enforce the imposition of penalties. So the principle of ethics, morals, laws are always conflicting one another. In a sense, this is a representation of the community's frustration of the police department and the victims of protest that had nothing to do with it. So regular citizens will take action into their own hands, will be more unprofessional and more irrational. Will make more irrational decisions because they lack the experience and the training that the police department goes through and pays heavily money for every officer to go through. Hence why the police academy is a rigorous course in general. Like the ethics versus morals versus law, it also brings another problem that the police department faces, which is an increase in crime. Because losing credibility, just as I said earlier, it just basically defaces the badge and the police department just because of a few bad apples. To understand the police, in an article from the Bloomberg Business Week, Polly Mazadenis and Jelema D. Robinson states that over a past 4 decades, the cost of policing in the United States almost tripled from 42.3 billion in 1977 to 114.5 billion in 2017, according to the analyst of U.S. Census Bureau Institute on behalf of Bloomberg Business Week. This will lead to actual meaning of defunding the police, in which is reallocating funds to for the police department to other resources like social justice, mental health task force, instead of fully funding the actual police force who actually enforces the law of our legislature. So let's say that defunding the police passes. That means the police who are practically the first responder to every 911 call that you would dial on the phone if you have an emergency issue. That basically limits their ability to respond as fast because their funding has now decreased. Nor that, and also, um, since the resources have been reallocated from different departments to another department, they won't have the necessary resources or enough employees that they can support to uh, to dispatch. Now that I have talked about the inherency of the problem, next I will talk about a possible solution um, of refunding the police. Tensions between police and communities, they serve uh, the tensions between police and communities have been very, very how should I say this? Has been happening for over decades, and uh, however, to ensure that the community is informed and that they're being listened, the police department should enforce more surveys to better gather information from the community's point of view. So little information is told to the public of how the police department operates, responds to the scene. Yet yes, there are programs that inform local communities. However, it is so little, it is too little, and have and fully have a it is so little to fully have a majority trust and credibility from the communities. In an article from the Vox published on July 31st, 2020, Ro Karma states that the best information on how police officers spend their time come from the calls from the service and made publicly available by individual police agencies. These are often defined as calls to emergency operators, 911 calls, alarms, the police radio, and non-emergency calls. Most calls for service are initiated by citizens, but the data I draw on here captures the officer's final categorization of the incident. So most people in a crime scene will have a different biased opinion because they have the mentality of, oh, I hate cops, so all cops are bad and corrupt, in which why refunding police will also help further the programs and better inform the communities to establish trust, credibility again. To further, in an article from Governing published on April 27th, 2015, Michael McCagg states that a censure asked respondents to identify the steps police takes to be more effective. In the graph that shows all the statistics, about 61% of people whose ages ranges from 18 to 34 say that with more cameras, body cameras will better help the police officer more liable for their action and also offers more transparency. By uh by listening to the communities, in my opinion, for decades, it feels like it has been two separate entities that have always been in conflict with one another. One will fight over another. The other the other side is trying to fix the issue, but also is in conflict with one another. In conclusion, I propose a possible solution, and now I will conclude my speech. State and federal governments should refund the police department in lieu of defunding the uh, defunding the police department, or even reallocating the funds that is supporting the police forces. Today I have discussed the problems, the attitudinal inherencies, and the possible solutions regarding defunding the police and the possible outcomes of it. So my closing thoughts is it is uncertain for both the community and the police department will get along fully, but we are all human and we should all basically understand the basic fundamental of civil right and human dignity, which can be determined between the definitions of ethics versus morals versus law. I do hope that the violence from the protests do stop, and I want to let everyone on both sides to know that I get why why the protesters are upset and angry and want a change or a reform, and how the police needs more transparency on responding to a few bad apples in the department to better serve the community regarding trust, credibility, and lastly, communication between two entities, which is not the best for everyone, just to have segregation among each other. We should all be united as one, fighting the same thing and staying strong. Thank you.